All right, welcome back, family, to my channel. As you see, today's study is called Holiday or Holy Day. It's the same thing. Okay, let's get into it. So, what is a holiday? A holiday is a day that is celebrated in remembrance of an event that has taken place in the past. This day is also associated with a day of rest from work, day off. So if we look at this definition of what a holiday is, and then we think about the Lord's holy days, what's the difference? What is the difference from a holiday or holy day? There's no difference. It's the same exact thing. In most jobs, on a holiday, you're given the day off. Most jobs, not all jobs. But in most jobs, you're given the day off. Isn't this what happens on the Lord's holy days? You rest from your work, right? And you remember the event that has taken place in the past. This is where we have an issue with today's leaders who are trying to get you to keep feast days. But they're not telling you what are the events that have taken place in the past that we remember. Okay? What are the events? Okay, question. If a holiday and holy day are the same thing, what is the event that has taken place in the past that we remember today? Here's your feast days. Now, some of you all may have different names for them. Some of you all may add in a couple extra feast days, such as Purim. Okay, but we're sticking to Leviticus chapter 23. And then in Leviticus chapter 23, it goes through the feast days. My question to you is, what is the event that is taking place in the past that we remember today? The only event that any Israelite talks about is the Passover. That's the only event that they can explain concerning these holy days, also called holidays. What about these other events? When did these events take place in the past? Because that's what a holiday is. You don't celebrate a holiday for an event that has already happened. You don't celebrate an event. You don't celebrate a holiday for an event that hasn't happened. You celebrate holidays for events that has already happened. When did these feast days, these holidays, when did they happen? No Israelite is showing you the truth. That's why your feast days are in vain. You don't understand what you're worshiping. You don't understand what you're trying to keep. We're going to break down every feast day, particularly in Leviticus chapter 23. Okay? Read with me. When Moses gave the feast days unto the children of Israel, Moses in his wisdom was explaining to Israel the events that were going to happen over the next 1,000 years. Okay, this was the millennium time. Okay? All the feast days takes place within this time. From Moses all the way down to the Babylon Exodus. Okay? From the Exodus out of Egypt to the Exodus out of Babylon. That was a 1,000-year period. Okay? And that's when all the feast days took place. Remember, a holiday is an event that took place in the past that we remember today. So where did the events of these feast days take place? Nobody is showing you this because they don't understand what they're reading. Okay? So let's get into it. As we see here, Moses and the Exodus. Got the promised land. We got Shiloh. We got David in Jerusalem. We got Solomon, affinity with Egypt. We got the kingdom of Assyria. We got Samaria, Babylon, Medes, Persians. And that's when we came out of Babylon. Okay. Then you go into the Apocrypha time. Okay. This timeline is right and exact. This is the timeline of events that happened in the Old Testament. We're going to look at the feast days that have taken place within these 1,000 years. Okay, let's get into it. Now, before we get into the Passover, we got to go through 2 weeks. The Passover is at the 14th day at even. So that means we have 2 weeks that we have to go through before we even get to the Passover. Those 2 weeks, brothers and sisters, are symbolic. They're symbolic. You don't need to sit around, try to keep 2 weeks and wait until the 14th day. This is symbolic talk. Those 2 weeks represent your 2 work weeks. Why is the Passover on the 14th day? Because that's the end of 2 weeks, 2 full weeks, 2 work weeks. What happens at the end of 2 work weeks? You usually get paid. Now, obviously, some jobs, they can pay you week by week. Sometimes you get paid day by day. Sometimes you get paid on the 15th and the 30th. But most jobs require you to work 2 full weeks before you get paid. Those 2 full weeks is symbolic, brothers and sisters. It represented our enslavement, our time under the oppressive rule of Egypt. Then after those 2 weeks, which really means after we done labored and did all our toil, then we leave. We quit our job. We got food. We finna eat. Now we finna move on. You work 2 weeks, then you leave, brothers and sisters. It's not like now where you continue to work year in and year out. This is all symbolic talk, brothers and sisters. The 14 days represent 2 work weeks. Okay? Have you ever known someone who worked a job for 2 weeks and quit once they got their paycheck? This is what happened with the children of Israel. After the 2 weeks expired, it was now time to get paid and quit. Israel retired from their abusive toil and enslavement and desired a severance package. Okay? Listen closely. In Leviticus chapter 20, verse 26, it says this, "And ye shall be holy unto me, for I the Lord am holy, and have severed you from other people, that ye should be mine." This was our severance package. Okay? Not only we got a severance package, but we also got reparations. Okay, Exodus chapter 3, verse 21 through 22 says this, "And I will give this people favor in the sight of the Egyptians. And it shall come to pass that when ye go, ye shall not go empty. But every woman shall borrow of her neighbor, and of her that sojourneth in her house, jewels of silver and jewels of gold, and raiment. And ye shall put them upon your sons and upon your daughters, and ye shall spoil the Egyptians. This is your reparations." Okay? You built up Egypt. You built up America. Now it's time for you to leave. And what did you leave with? You left with all the wealth of the land. This was your reparations. Okay? After you did your work for your 2 weeks, you ate your food, because the Bible says if a man don't work, he don't eat. Okay? We did our labor in Egypt. Now it's time for us to leave. We no longer serving the Egyptians anymore. Okay? Now, sabbatical retirement. The Passover was the sabbatical retirement. The children of Israel left their old place of employment in search for a new place of opportunity and rest. No longer workers for the man, which was the pharaohs. Okay? They now desire to start their own businesses and become independent. This is what happened to the children of Israel when they left out of Egypt. They became independent. They wasn't relying upon the nations. They wasn't relying upon Egypt anymore. They were independent now. They started their own businesses. They started their own companies. Okay? The wilderness, the vacant spot. God searched out a spot for the Israelites to start their own entrepreneurial endeavors. Every business owner knows that the first thing in starting a business is to come up with a name and a location. Behold, the wilderness of Jehovah. Okay? In Exodus chapter 20, verse 24, let's read that. Exodus chapter 20, verse 24. It says this: an altar of earth thou shalt make unto me, and shalt sacrifice thereon thy burnt offerings and thy peace offerings, thy sheep and thy oxen. In all places where I record my name, I will come unto thee, and I will bless thee. So this scripture says, in all places where the Lord places his name. What is this telling us, brothers and sisters? The Lord franchised his name. The same way you can go out and start your own McDonald's. You can start your own McDonald's right now. You're franchising the name. Right? We don't just have, there's not just one McDonald's and we all have to go to that one McDonald's. It's McDonald's all over the place. It's Walgreens all over the place. It's Walmart's all over the place. Target's all over the place. Why? Because they're franchised. You take the name and you operate according to the standards of that name and business. The Lord franchised his name to his people. That's why he says, in all places where I record my name, there shall you come. That's business talk, brothers and sisters. That's business talk. I put my name here, that means you can go there. If I put my name over there, you can go over there. Wherever I record my name, wherever I place my stamp upon you, wherever I place my stamp, that's where you can go to, because my name is in that place. That's business talk, brothers and sisters. The Lord franchised his name unto his people. Okay? Let's continue. After the Passover, you have the unleavened bread. Now, what is unleavened bread? Unleavened bread is bread that doesn't rise as much when baked compared to bread with yeast. Unleavened bread was symbolic of the condition of the children of Israel. They rose up just a little bit, but not too much. Okay? Every time you hear the location, every time you hear the location of Egypt, it always states that Egypt was down. Genesis chapter 12, verse 10. Abram went down into Egypt. Genesis 37, verse 25. And the Lord appeared unto him and said, go not down into Egypt. Genesis 39, verse 1. And Joseph was brought down into Egypt. So, the unleavened bread represents our lowliness, our time when we were brought under the pharaohs and the kings. We ate bread of lowliness. We were not the top dog. We were not the head. We were the tail. We became slaves. We were submissive. Okay? Egypt was considered down. Then when we went to the wilderness, we rose up just a little bit. But we still wasn't at an elevated state. That's why it says go up into the promised land. So Egypt represents the lowest of the low. Then we went to the wilderness. We rose up just a little bit. Then we went even higher when we went into the promised land. Okay? When God brought the children of Israel up out of the land, they were still considered in Egypt. This was Upper Egypt. This represents the condition of the Israelites of today. We came out of slavery, but still suffer the treatment of oppression. It wasn't until they came into the promised land that they were fully out. This is why the scripture states, Joshua chapter 5, verse 9. Then the Lord said to Joshua, this day have I rolled away the reproach of Egypt from off you. Okay? He tells Joshua, remember, Joshua is the one that brought the children of Israel into the promised land. So why is the Lord telling Joshua, this day have I rolled away the reproach from off you? Because they were still considered in Egypt. It was Upper Egypt. The wilderness was Upper Egypt. Okay? The manna stopped once the children finally arrived in the promised land. This was the end of unleavened bread. You can find that in Joshua chapter 5, verse 12. So when they got to the promised land, the bread stopped. This was the end of unleavened bread feast. It was done. Now watch this. After the Passover, after unleavened bread, then we go into the first fruit harvest. Notice what I wrote here. The first fruit harvest doesn't occur until the Israelites enter the promised land. So that means when Moses wrote these feast days, Moses had nothing to do with the first fruit harvest. Moses died before they even came into the promised land. That means Moses' feast days were looking ahead into the future. Moses didn't bring you into the promised land. Joshua did. The first fruit harvest does not occur until they enter into the land. That means for 40 years in the wilderness, they couldn't have kept this feast. While they were with Moses in the wilderness, they could not have kept these feasts, brothers and sisters. Because this feast occurs once they come into the land. Moses didn't go into the land. That means Moses was looking into the future, brothers and sisters. Okay, the first fruit harvest represents the first to go into the land. This is why the first fruit harvest took place in the land of promise. Leviticus 23 verse 10. When ye come into the land which I give unto you, and shall reap the harvest thereof, then ye shall bring a sheaf of the first fruits of your harvest unto the priest. This was looking ahead to the time of Joshua and Eleazar, okay, who was a son of Aaron. Okay, this didn't occur until after Moses died, until Joshua and them came into the land. So for 40 years in the wilderness, they did not even keep these feasts. This is the first fruit harvest, the first ones to go into the land. This was prophecy, brothers and sisters. The priest, which the scriptures are referring to, was Eleazar, the son of Aaron. It was him whom the children of Israel gathered unto. Joshua chapter 14 verse 1 says this, and these are the countries which the children of Israel inherited in the land of Canaan, which Eleazar the priest distributed for an inheritance to them. Right here is the fulfillment of Leviticus 23 verse 10. Okay? They came unto the priest. The first fruits are the first Israelites to go into the land. Okay? Joshua chapter 19 verse 51. These are the inheritances which Eleazar the priest, you see how they specifically call him the priest, okay, divided for an inheritance by lot in Shiloh before the Lord at the door of the tabernacle of congregation. The priest that is mentioned in Leviticus 23:10 is talking about Eleazar, the son of Aaron. He's the one that the children of Israel gathered themselves unto. Okay, now if you continue to read Leviticus chapter 23, it goes into what we call the wave offering. Okay, when you wave something, you are moving your hand to and fro from one side to another. The wave offering was the children of Israel moving throughout the promised land, just like a wave moves you from one place to another place. Okay, that's what the wave offering is, brothers and sisters. It's you moving from one place to another place, from one side to another side. Okay, then if you continue reading, it speaks about the 7 Sabbaths. Okay, the 7 Sabbaths represent the 7 tribes that had not yet inherited their land and received rest. This is why Joshua wrote a book describing the land into 7 parts. Okay, so in Leviticus 23, let me get the scripture. In Leviticus 23, starting at verse 15, it says this, and ye shall count unto you from the morrow after the Sabbath, from the day that ye brought the sheaf of the wave offering, 7 Sabbaths shall be complete. Okay, then it says, even unto the morrow after the 7th Sabbath shall ye number 50 days, and ye shall offer a new meat offering unto the Lord. You shall bring out of your habitations 2 wave loaves of 2 tenth deals. They shall be of fine flour. They shall be baken with leaven. They are the first fruits unto the Lord. Okay, these 7 Sabbaths, brothers and sisters, represent the 7 tribes that had not yet inherited their land. Okay, Joshua chapter 18 verse 2. And there remained among the children of Israel 7 tribes which had not yet received their inheritance. That means they hadn't received their rest yet. This is what those 7 Sabbaths mean. Okay, Joshua 18 verse 9. And the men went and passed through the land and described it by cities into 7 parts in a book, and came again to Joshua to the host at Shiloh. Okay, so this first fruits, brothers and sisters, are the first ones to go into the land. Okay, the end gathering. Now I meant to write something here, but I forgot to do that. The two wave loaves. We just read that in Leviticus 23, verse 17. It says, ye shall bring out of your habitations 2 wave loaves. Okay? It says, they shall be of fine flour, they shall be baken with leaven. These 2 wave loaves represents the tribe of Ephraim, which is the house of Joseph, and the tribe of Judah, okay, which is the house of Judah. Okay, these 2 wave loaves are baking with leaven. Why are they baking with leaven? Read this with me. The 2 wave loaves represents the land of the tribe of Ephraim and Judah. Joshua and Caleb were the only 2 men to wholly follow the Lord. Joshua was of Ephraim, Caleb was of Judah. These 2 wave loaves were made with leaven because it represented the rising up unto the land of these 2 tribes. Okay, these 2 wave loaves had leaven in them. This represented these 2 tribe leaders rising up and establishing the house of Joseph in Shiloh, then the house of Jerusalem, the house of Judah in Jerusalem. Okay. These are the 2 wave loaves, brothers and sisters. Remember, Joshua and Caleb come from the tribe of Joseph and Judah. These are the only 2 of the original men that came out of Egypt. These were the only 2 who went into the promised land. Okay? Also, the sons of Aaron made it as well. But that's a whole nother story. Okay? Numbers 32, verse 10 through 12. And the Lord's anger was kindled the same time, and he sware, saying, surely none of the men that came up out of Egypt, from 20 years old and upward, shall see the land which I swear unto Abraham, unto Isaac, and unto Jacob, because they have not wholly followed me, except Caleb the son of Jephunneh the Kenizzite, and Joshua the son of Nun, for they have wholly followed the Lord. See, this is where those 2 wave loaves come in at. These 2 wave loaves represents Joshua and Caleb, who come from the house of Joseph and from the house of Judah. Okay, this is why we went to Shiloh and Jerusalem. Shiloh was the first place which all the tribes went up to keep the feast. Because of sin, the place of gathering was changed unto Jerusalem, which Judah later claimed. Okay, so we started in Shiloh. Then we went to Jerusalem later on. These are the only 2 places that we were gathering together at. Shiloh and Jerusalem. That's the 2 wave loaves. One for Joseph, one for Judah. Okay? Now the last 4 feasts. The last 4 feasts, trumpets, atonement, tabernacle, and booths, all pertain to the tribe of Judah. These feasts were divinely written in the blessing of Moses concerning Judah. So if you remember, Moses blessed the children of Israel. And in the blessing of Judah, Deuteronomy chapter 33, verse 7, this is what Moses says concerning Judah. And this is the blessing of Judah. And he said, hear, Lord, the voice of Judah, and bring him unto his people. Let his hands be sufficient for him, and be thou a help to him from his enemies. Moses mentions 4 blessings upon Judah. The first one, he says, hear, Lord, the voice of Judah. That deals with the trumpets. Then he says, and bring him unto his people. That deals with the atonement. Then he says, let his hands be sufficient for him. That deals with the tabernacles. Then he says, and be thou a help to him from his enemies. That deals with the booths. Okay, let's get into it. Next feast we have is the trumpets. Hear, Lord, the voice of Judah. Okay, trumpets represents a loud sound which can be heard from a long distance. It was in King Solomon's prayer when the temple was dedicated that he prayed for the voice of his people to be heard. You can read that in 1 Kings chapter 8, verse 27 through 53. Every time Solomon prayed this prayer, at the end of his sentences, he would say, "Hear, Lord, the voice of your people." The voices of the people are the trumpets. You can find that in Isaiah chapter 58, verse 1. It says, "Cry loud, spare not. Lift up thy voice like a trumpet, and show my people their transgression, and the house of Jacob their sins." The voices of God's people were considered trumpets now. We don't go around blowing ram's horns in the 21st century. That's not what these things mean. These trumpets represent people's voices that have a long distance effect. Their voice reaches out unto the land. Their voice is that powerful enough to extend out over the land. Okay? So in today's time, that's like somebody having a network and their voice is heard on different stations. Their voice is heard throughout the entire country. Their voice is heard internationally. That's symbolic of a trumpet, because a trumpet can be heard over long distance of land. Okay? So read 1 Kings chapter 8, verse 27 through 53, and notice how Solomon keeps saying, "Hear, Lord, the voice of your people." Okay? The voice of the people was now considered trumpets that will be heard by God in his high holy heaven. Okay? Now we go into the atonement. The word atonement means at one. It also means to unite. Okay? Atonement, it means to be at one. To be brought together again, to be united again. Okay? Notice here, I said the Jubilee and atonement goes together, because during the time of Jubilee, the slaves were turned back unto their family, becoming one again, and their possessions. They were turned back unto their family and unto their possessions. So think about this for a second. On the Day of Atonement, the Jubilee trumpet was blown. The Jubilee deals with you returning back unto your family and to your possessions. How could the children of Israel kept this in the wilderness? If you was in the wilderness right now, you would be scratching your head talking about, "Moses, you said that on the atonement, on the Day of Atonement, we're supposed to return back unto our family and unto our possessions. How can we keep this feast? We're already with our family. We're already with our possessions. How are we supposed to return back to them?" Moses would have told you this is a prophecy that's going to happen later on in your generations. That's what Moses would have told you. This is a prophecy looking into the future. There's going to come a time where you're going to go back into slavery. Okay? Through Babylon, through the Assyrians, through the Persians, through the Medes. And there will come a time where the Lord will bring you back unto the land of Jerusalem. Moses was looking into the future, brothers and sisters. And this is how he explained it to them. But you have people today trying to keep a feast. You can't keep these feasts. You can't keep these feasts. These are events that already took in place. Your job is to understand what has happened, because the Lord does not change. Okay, let's read this. Atonement, bring him unto his people. On the Day of Atonement, the Jubilee trumpet was to be blown. You can find that in Leviticus chapter 25, verse 9. Let's read that. Leviticus 25, verse 9. Then shalt thou cause the trumpet of the Jubilee to sound on the 10th day of the 7th month. In the Day of Atonement shall ye make the trumpet sound throughout all your land. So what is this Jubilee trumpet? This trumpet signified a returning back unto the land from which the Jewish people were scattered. Also during this day, the priest and his anointed were responsible for making the atonement for the people. You can find that in Leviticus chapter 16, verse 29 through 34. Let's read that. And this shall be a statute forever unto you, that in the 7th month, on the 10th day of the month, ye shall afflict your souls and do no work at all, whether it be one of your own country or a stranger that sojourneth among you. For on that day shall the priest make an atonement for you to cleanse you, that ye may be clean from all your sins before the Lord. It shall be a Sabbath of rest unto you, and ye shall afflict your souls by a statute forever. Okay, and the priest whom he shall anoint, and whom he shall consecrate to minister in the priest's office in his father's stead, shall make the atonement, and shall put on the linen clothes, even the holy garments. Okay, you can read the rest. So right here, brothers and sisters, this anointed priest that made the atonement. Remember, what does atonement means? At one. Unite. The priest who made this atonement was Cyrus, the anointed of the Lord. Okay? This Jubilee trumpet was sounded by Cyrus, the anointed of the Lord. Cyrus was the anointed priest of that time. He was the anointed priest of that time, brothers and sisters. He's the one that brought forth the atonement. He's the one that told the Israelites, gather yourself and go back into the land. He's the one that brought us at one again. He's the one that blew the Jubilee trumpet and said, all Israelites, go back unto your land. He's the one that made the atonement. Okay, Israel and Judah had both fallen away from God so bad that God used a man of Persian ancestry to be his anointed. King Cyrus wrote and declared that the Jewish people be set free to rebuild the house of the Lord. 2 Chronicles chapter 36, verse 22 through 23. Let's read that. Second Chronicles chapter 36, verse 22 and 23. Now in the first year of Cyrus, king of Persia, that the word of the Lord spoken by the mouth of Jeremiah might be accomplished, the Lord stirred up the spirit of Cyrus, king of Persia, that he made a proclamation throughout all his kingdom, and put it also in writing, saying, Thus says Cyrus, king of Persia, all the kingdoms of the earth have the Lord God of heaven given me, and he have charged me to build him a house in Jerusalem, which is in Judah. Who is there among you of all his people? The Lord his God be with him, and let him go up. Right here, brothers and sisters, he set the Israelites free. This was the time of the atonement. This was the time of the Jubilee trumpet. Go back into your land. You're free now. Go back and build the house of the Lord. Okay? The Day of Atonement occurred on the 10th day of the month. The reason being was because a tenth part would return back unto the land. This is the meaning of Isaiah chapter 6, verse 13. It says, but yet in it shall be a tenth, and it shall return and be eaten as a teil tree and as an oak, whose substance is in them, when they cast their leaves. So the holy seed shall be the substance thereof. This is where we get people who pay their tithes. They talk about giving 10%. That 10% represents those 10 lost tribes, brothers and sisters. Because if you remember, Ezra was not of the tribe of Judah. You had Levites that came up with Judah out of Babylon. Ezra was of Israel. He was not of Judah. Remember, Israel and Judah were scattered. But you had particular Israelites, those of the Levites. Okay, we know Benjamin was already joined to Judah. But you had other tribes that had escaped out of Assyria. Okay, you had other tribes that escaped out of Judah, and they joined together. They became one. Okay, so anybody giving 10% tithe, that has nothing to do with the true tithe of the Lord. The true tithe of the Lord is the 10 lost tribes of Israel. That's the true tithe. You giving 10% of your income is not the true tithe. It's not the true tithe. The true tithe is the 10 lost tribes returning back unto their Lord. Okay? Now, this leads way to the next feast. When the children of Israel came back into the land, what were they responsible for doing? Building the house of the Lord. This is where we get the tabernacles. Let his hands be sufficient for him. Your hands got to be strong to build the house of the Lord. Okay? Once the children of Israel were set free, they started rebuilding the house of the Lord. This is why the book of Haggai, chapter 1, verse 2 states, thus speaketh the Lord of hosts, saying, this people say, the time is not come, the time that the Lord's house should be built. Obviously, brothers and sisters, it was a timeline. Why are they now going into rebuilding the house of the Lord? Because we just came from the atonement. The atonement brought us back together. We returned back into our land, and now we're building the tabernacle, which was the house of the Lord. All of these feast days are in order, brothers and sisters. This is history. Moses was giving you your history. He already knew what was going to happen. Only way you could have kept these feast days, brothers and sisters, were if you were living through them. This is not something that you have control over. These are God's events that he already has planned for you. It's just like the seasons. We know it's going to be fall. We know it's going to be winter. We know it's going to be spring. We know it's going to be summer. These are events that has already been put into the atmosphere. You're just living through them. Wherever you get in, that's where you fit in. These are events, brothers and sisters. Feast days are events that have already happened. Okay? Obviously, there was a time set for the house of the Lord to be rebuilt. If the children knew the truth regarding the feast days, they would have known the time. See, you had the children of Israel talking about it's not time to build the house. Hold on. We just had the trumpets. We just had the atonements. Now it's time to rebuild. Now it's time to rebuild. And watch this. The last feast, which is the Feast of Booths, right? Notice here, the Feast of Booths took place during the same time of the Feast of Tabernacles. During this feast, branches or boughs were taken. These branches represent the children who had separated themselves from the tree of Babylon. Ask yourself this, brothers and sisters. Why are the children of Israel taking branches off trees? What's the point of that? What is the symbolic meaning behind that? It represented them separating themselves from the tree of Babylon, brothers and sisters. Remember, Nebuchadnezzar had that dream. He saw himself as a tree, and that tree was cut down. The ones who lived under Nebuchadnezzar's rule, they were the branches. And when the time came for them to separate themselves, they separated themselves from the tree of Babylon, from the kingdom of Babylon, and they went back into their land. That's what the boughs, the branches, represent. Branches are the ones who separated themselves from Babylon. Okay? Just like they did in Egypt. We separated ourselves from Pharaoh in Egypt. Now we separated ourselves from Babylon. Okay? Remember when God gave King Nebuchadnezzar the dream of the tree that was cut down but left the stump? You can find that in Daniel chapter 4, verse 10 through 18. The children of the captivity were the branches. This is why we read about the branch of righteousness and the 2 olive trees in the book of Zechariah. Think about that. We start hearing about the branch of righteousness. You read that in the book of Zechariah. Then you start hearing about the 2 olive trees. You read about that in Zechariah. Why are we talking about trees so much? King Nebuchadnezzar had a dream. He was a tree. Why are we talking about these trees so much? Because now it's time for the Feast of Booths. Now it's time for us, the separated branches, the branches of uprightness. We separated ourselves from the tree of Babylon, and we established ourselves back in our homeland. This is actually where you get, brothers and sisters, family reunions. Why is it that particularly us black folks, when we have family reunions, why we always have a tree? Why we always have a shirt with a tree on it? Think about that. Family reunions, brothers and sisters, is the same thing that the children of Israel had. Did not they have to reunite with their family? They were scattered. They had to reunite. This was a family reunion. You reunited back with your family. We're doing the same thing that the children of Israel did back then. The same mind state that they had then, we're still doing now. Why do blacks have family reunions every year? And why do they have t-shirts with trees on them? This is deep-rooted information, brothers and sisters, because you were under that tree of Babylon. You separated yourself from Babylon. You had to reunite with your family, brothers and sisters. Family reunions are biblical. Okay? All prophecy is perfectly inspired. Just as this feast took place when the children of Israel came out of Egypt, so did it take place when the children of the captivity came out of Babylon 1,000 years later. The helpers, the enemies of the Lord, were strong against the Jews during this time because they didn't want them rebuilding the house of the Lord. But the Lord sent Ezra and the prophets to help them prosper in their work. The name Ezra means help or helper. Okay? So, brother and sister, I just broke down the feast days to you. I just walked you through the feast days. Okay? We just walked through Moses and the Exodus. Okay? First and second week of labor. Then we had the Passover. Then we had the unleavened bread in the wilderness. Okay? Then we had the first fruits. Those were the first to come into the land. Then we had the end gathering. That's the end of the year. That's when we gathered into Shiloh. That's when we gathered into Jerusalem. Then we had the trumpets. That was Solomon's prayer when he made the temple. Then we had the atonement, which took place after we were scattered. We blew the Jubilee trumpet. We gathered back into the land under King Cyrus. Then we built the tabernacle. Okay? Then we took the booths. That was us separating ourselves from Babylon and reestablishing ourselves back in Jerusalem. And that's the feast days, brothers and sisters. There's probably 2 feast days that I didn't speak. I didn't speak of Purim. But Purim takes place during the time of Esther. Okay? Esther's life is right up in here, brothers and sisters. Right up in here. So all the feast days took place from Moses and the Exodus to the Babylonian Exodus with Zerubbabel, Joshua, and Ezra, and Nehemiah. Okay? So, hopefully you learned something, brothers and sisters. And until next time, peace.